and this is the tomb of Balban. So Balban is a king who is sometime in the 13th century. So he's one of the early kings to rule from Delhi. And this is early medieval period. So when you consider Indian history, the periodization is the same as anywhere else: ancient, medieval, modern. And our medieval is a fairly long stretch. It starts somewhere around the 10th century, roughly speaking, and goes right up to the middle of the 19th. And within this big chunk of time, we have divided the medieval into two broad phases. One is called the Sultanate period, which is till the first quarter of the 16th century, so 1525, 26. And Sultanate period saw a number of dynasties ruling from Delhi. The famous Qutub Minar is built during that time. The Lodi Garden gets its name from the fact that the Lodis built monuments which you see there. Tughlaqabad. So the slave dynasty, the Tughlaqs, the Lodis, these are names which are familiar to many of us, and these are names of dynasties who ruled in the Sultanate period. After the Sultanate period is over, you have the Mughals, who rule again for a very long time. So from 1526 onwards, right up to the middle of the 19th century, when you have the British taking over as the official rulers of the country. And that's when we enter the modern phase. Balban is in the Sultanate period, in the 13th century. And 13th century is the time which is, it's politically unstable. There are slaves who have taken who have claimed political authority now. They are fighting with each other, and everybody thinks that they are an equal claimant to the throne. So it's not that only one family or one clan has the claim to political leadership. Everyone thinks that they are an equal claimant, which means that everybody is ready to kill off the other person just to get to the throne. So it's a very, very volatile situation. And in this situation, Balban manages to rule for about 40 odd years. 20 years first as a vice regent to a king. He installed a puppet king and lorded over him. And then he went on, he killed off the king, and then got the throne for himself. So he is a personality who he's a very, very dominant personality of the 13th century. And when we study about him, when we read about him as a person who brought things together in a situation which is volatile, a situation which is not stable. He is somebody who first, as a commander, went on to consolidate the possessions of the empire. It's much easier to actually acquire new land, expand your empire, and actually consolidate it. Balban managed to do that. Balban is notorious for, you could say notorious from the other point of view. He's notorious for having subdued the local rajas in the area around Delhi. So for Balban and people who were part of the political class, this is a great achievement. But people who were being subdued obviously did not like it very much. So Balban has a reputation of being strict, ruthless. He killed off all competition, all his contemporaries, just to get to the throne. So he's somebody who is spoken of as with a lot of awe, somebody who in the whole of 13th century manages to rule for 40 odd years, which is a big achievement, it's a big deal. And this is his tomb. His grave is no longer around. We don't know if something might be still there underground. Nobody has bothered to check. But this place is identified as Balban's tomb. And another significant aspect, another significant history about this building is that it is the earliest surviving building to use the true arch in its construction technique. Before this building, there is no evidence of the true arch being used in construction. The Qutub complex, which is adjacent to where we are standing, is actually an older complex. This building is sometime around, Balban died 1287. So the building is second half of 13th century, not earlier than that, not later than that. Qutub Minar is much earlier. And that complex also does not use the correct technique of making arches. This is the first building one has identified where the true arch is being used in construction.
True arch as in the whole this dome thing?
No.
This
This structure as an arch, but okay. Now I'll try and elaborate. I don't know how effective it will be. When we build anything, you do two basic things. You span spaces, and then you try and achieve height. Two basic things you need to do. Yeah? The easiest way to span spaces is you have many pillars, and you put a flat roof over it. So this is how you spread horizontally. And if you want to go up, you want to build a tall building, what you do is, suppose you have two pillars, and you start putting horizontal beams on them. So if I don't have a diagram, but two pillars, and I put horizontal beams on them, and I gradually bring these beams closer to each other, so that as I go up, I get something like a triangular structure which has some height. Yeah? Now this technique is called trabeate. 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 Okay, again let the airplane pass. Now this is the most common technique of building, and it's still used, and you'll find it used everywhere in the Indian subcontinent before the arch was introduced. Now the limitation of this technique is you can't have your pillars too far apart, because the horizontal beams you have put to bridge the gap will break, because it has a lot of weight on it which is going right down vertical. So if I have a very long beam, it will break. Yeah? So my structure will not sustain. The arch did away with this. What it did was, okay, I'll try and use this one for illustration. So imagine that these are my two pillars. Yeah, there's a pillar here and there's a pillar here, and I have to bridge the gap between the two. So instead of putting horizontal beams one on top of each other, what I do is I put my masonry in this formation at an angle to each other, almost like the rays of the sun. So it's not one on top of each other, they are at an angle to each other. And this whole structure, the pieces of stone which are aligned in an angle, they are held together by a sad looking stone here. There's a bit of a triangular stone in the middle of the arch, where the sides of the arch join. There's supposed to be an inverted triangular stone there.
It's clearer there.
Which is called the keystone. So the keystone actually holds together this arch. And what this does is, this sort of a formation, this sort of a masonry means that I can have a wider arch. This gap between the two pillars can be much wider. So I do away with the need to have horizontal beams and my pillars close together. So this technique is called arcuate, and from the word arch. And this is the correct technique of building an arch. I can get the shape of the arch in a trabeate technique also, which is done in the Qutub complex, but that's not the correct, or you would say the true technique of building it. Yeah? So this is the building which is believed to be the earliest surviving example of the use of this technique, and not the Qutub.
So, which means that these structures were bigger than the other ones which use that?
Not necessarily bigger, because if you've been to the Qutub, try and visualize the mosque there. The mosque has some very large screens, half of them not standing, yeah, they're gone. Those screens are much higher than this, yeah, but they are built in the trabeate form. So what you had horizontal beams, and they just cut off the sides to get this shape, yeah, but the masonry was horizontal, one on top of each other. That, okay, we are coming to it. नहीं, चार है. Okay. Yes. So about that carving, okay, taking off from that point, the way you see the walls today, this is just bare masonry which has which has become exposed now after years, after centuries. Yeah? Earlier, all of this masonry would have been plastered over. The same way we plaster our homes today, except that we are using bricks and then plastering them over and then whitewashing them or doing whatever we want. In this case, the masonry is stone and plastered over. So when the plaster is wet, you go about carving it, you incise it. That's how you get the patterns there. Can you see a little bit of a decoration? Yeah. And then there is a hint of blue also there. That blue is what remains of tile work. So this is a very, very small sample. The next stop will have much more of this. But this is, being a royal tomb, it gives you an idea that how this building would have been decorated. This is not the main chamber we are standing in. We were earlier standing in the main chamber of the tomb, and then there are two chambers on both the sides. So this one seems to have a grave, which is not of Balban, and it would have been a covered chamber. The bit of the area where there's some decoration is slanting a little bit. It's curving a little bit. So it would have formed an arched sort of a thing over this portion where we are standing. Now this fellow, whose grave we see, is identified as Khan Shahid. This is more of a title rather than an actual name. Khan is a fairly generic title for a commander or a person of importance. Shahid is a martyr. And this is believed to be the burial of Balban's favorite son, who died very young fighting the Mongols. Now, in the 13th century, the Mongols are all over Central Asia, and they're a big threat to anyone who's trying to rule in Delhi. They have to deal with Mongols if they want to go anywhere in life. So you just cannot ignore them. So Balban originally, his claim to fame as a commander came from the fact that he effectively dealt with Mongols for a very long time as a commander. So it's said that this son of Balban, who was his favorite son, died fighting the Mongols very, very young. He died before Balban apparently, and this is considered his burial. And it's said that Balban, who was happy to kill off people right and left, died at grief at the death of this very son. So I don't know how true that is, but that's what we are told. And sometimes you'll see that people come here, offer incense, light agarbatti, flowers, etc. But this is making of a shrine of this grave is a very, very modern phenomenon. So he doesn't really have any spiritual credentials, which I know of. But it's a very, very modern thing that people have started. You'll see a bit of oil, yeah, this blackened portion. This is oil, scented oil, which people have put here whenever they've come to offer prayers.
Sandstone.
This is sandstone, yes. The writing would be verses from the Quran. Then I don't think any of these is a historical inscription which might give us any information like date or date.
When did this fall down?
No. Whatever is left is there because of restoration work done on it regularly.